Early September 1944. The sun hung low over the Palau archipelago, burning the horizon into a smear of gold and orange that reflected off the tranquil waters surrounding Peleliu. From the deck of the heavy cruiser Chikuma, Admiral Soemu Toyoda squinted through the binoculars, his eyes narrowing against the glare of the morning. Beside him, Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki adjusted the brim of his cap, following the same line of sight. The Japanese reconnaissance seaplanes had returned only an hour before, reporting the presence of a massive enemy fleet converging from the southeast. "What in heaven's name?" Toyoda muttered, voice barely above a whisper. His lips were tight, almost brittle. "They have assembled an armada, larger than I anticipated." Ugaki's gaze, sharp and calculating, scanned the horizon with a historian's precision and a warrior's apprehension. "We knew they were advancing from the Marianas, but this is unprecedented. Battleships, carriers, transports, more than the reports suggested. Entire divisions afloat in the open sea. They move like a single organism. The reconnaissance data had confirmed it. The Americans were approaching with 2 fleet carriers, 3 escort carriers, at least 6 battleships, a dozen cruisers, and over 50 transports. Hundreds of landing craft trailed the larger vessels, their steel hulls glinting in the early sun. The sheer coordination, the tight formation, and the apparent synchronization of this flotilla defied the Japanese estimates. Intelligence had suggested strength, but not this magnitude. Toyoda lowered his binoculars and exhaled slowly, the lines of his face drawn tight with concern. "We have faced enemy fleets before, at the Marianas and Leyte Gulf. We expected harassment, localized engagements, raids. But this is not a raid. This is an invasion the likes of which the Pacific has not seen." Ugaki nodded, tapping his fingers against the polished wooden rail. "Our doctrine. We are trained to attrition, to strike where the enemy is vulnerable, to bleed them over time. Here, there is no time. They have the men, the ships, the planes, and, most importantly, the logistics to sustain this assault. We cannot match that with islands and bunkers alone." The general's attention shifted back to the horizon. Through the rising haze, the silhouettes of American battleships became more distinct, their gun turrets bristling like iron titans, capable of lobbing shells over 20 kilometers. Carrier decks stretched for hundreds of meters, crowded with fighters and bombers poised to launch devastating strikes. Even the transports suggested an industrial-scale landing, thousands of troops aboard each vessel, ready to disembark and storm the fortified island. Reports from Peleliu's garrison had indicated modest Japanese troop strength, barely 11,000 soldiers, spread thin over the coral ridges and limestone caves that dotted the island. The Americans, by contrast, were projecting a landing force nearly 3 times that number, supported by artillery, air support, and armoured amphibious vehicles. The disparity, Toyoda realized, could not be overcome by courage or skill alone. The officers beside him murmured quietly, exchanging tactical possibilities. Ugaki, ever the methodical strategist, drew a rough diagram in the sand near the deck's railing, mapping the projected positions of enemy vessels and likely landing zones. "They will approach from the southeast," he said. "Our coastal artillery can strike, but for how long? They will suppress our defences with air support before the first wave hits the beaches." Toyoda's hand moved across the sand, tracing lines of defensive positions. "We have spent years fortifying these islands, cave networks, bunkers, artillery positions. But can steel and stone withstand this storm? Every shell that falls, every bomb that drops, will erode our ability to resist." The discussion drifted naturally to prior encounters. At the Marianas, Japanese forces had relied on attritional tactics, hoping to inflict maximum casualties to slow the American advance. At Leyte Gulf, the Japanese Navy had suffered catastrophic losses attempting to engage superior forces head-on. Both experiences left Toyoda and Ugaki uneasy. The Americans had learned the lessons of island warfare: coordination, combined arms, and logistical dominance. Peleliu, isolated and exposed, was about to test those lessons against the remnants of Japan's Pacific defences. A reconnaissance float plane returning from the northeast brought updated figures. Admiral Toyoda, Vice Admiral Ugaki. Additional confirmation: 3 more carriers detected. Air wing strength estimated at 200 to 250 aircraft. The transport's number closer to 60. They are approaching under radio silence. Toyoda's eyes darkened. 200 aircraft for 11,000 men. They will dominate the skies and the waters simultaneously. There will be no respite, no opportunity to regroup or counterattack effectively. Their doctrine allows for simultaneous suppression on every front. Ugaki exhaled, his posture rigid. We cannot deny that the Americans understand industrial warfare. They can replenish men, planes, and ships faster than we can destroy them. And here we are, on a single island, hoping that terrain and courage can even the odds. It will not. Toyoda nodded slowly, his mind racing through potential strategies. He envisioned ambushes from caves, artillery barrages from hidden emplacements, and suicide charges aimed at crippling landing craft. Yet each plan felt increasingly futile. The Americans had brought overwhelming numbers, firepower, and technological advantage. P-38 Lightnings and F-6F. Hellcats would dominate the skies. Bombers would make short work of static defences. Even their naval gunfire could level the stone fortifications painstakingly built over months. The Admiral's attention returned to the horizon. The American fleet moved like a living entity, carriers at the centre, battleships on the flanks, destroyers screening ahead, and transports trailing behind. Every ship seemed to occupy its precise position in an elaborate dance rehearsed to perfection. Toyoda and Ugaki shared a silent understanding. The scale of coordination, the depth of resources, and the readiness of this force could not be matched by conventional defensive doctrine. A signal flare from shore indicated that Peleliu's garrison had sighted the fleet. The island's defenders were preparing for the expected bombardment. Toyoda's gaze lingered on the coral ridges in the distance. "They will land soon," he murmured, "and when they do, our doctrine of attrition will be tested against a force that can absorb losses and continue forward, relentlessly." Ugaki's reply was calm but firm, a reflection of years spent in the Navy and countless hours studying the art of war. "We have the advantage of terrain, the advantage of fortifications, but not the advantage of numbers, nor of firepower, nor of logistics. Peleliu will not be won by hope alone." As the sun climbed higher, the fleet's silhouette became clearer, stretching across the horizon like a line of iron and smoke. For the Japanese commanders, the sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They had expected a formidable American presence. They had not expected an armada capable of redefining the limits of naval warfare. For the men aboard the Chikuma and the surrounding command vessels, the first sight of the American Pacific Fleet was a moment of stark clarity. Peleliu would be a crucible, the full scale of industrial, tactical, and technological might brought to bear in a single, decisive campaign. And from the Japanese perspective, the calculus was unforgiving. Against such a force, courage and attrition alone could only delay the inevitable. September 12th, 1944. The dawn air above Peleliu carried a metallic scent, thick with the promise of fire and steel. From the command ship Chikuma, Admiral Toyoda and Vice Admiral Ugaki watched the horizon with mounting concern. The reconnaissance planes had already returned with grim confirmation. The Americans were not merely approaching, they were attacking. From the eastern horizon, columns of smoke rose in pale spirals, marking the positions of cruisers and battleships as they opened fire on the island. The first salvo struck the ridges of Peleliu with terrifying precision. Explosions threw clouds of coral and dust high into the sky. Flashes of flame and black smoke cascaded down the limestone cliffs, shaking the nerves of the Japanese commanders who had anticipated such an assault, yet could not fully grasp its scale. They hit every emplacement simultaneously, Ugaki murmured, gripping the rail. His voice was quiet, taut with disbelief. The firepower. It is unimaginable. Each salvo is calculated, coordinated. They are not probing, they are annihilating. Toyoda adjusted his binoculars, scanning the shattered coral ridges. Artillery emplacements had been obliterated before defenders could even bring their guns to bear. Concrete bunkers cracked under the impact of naval shells. The Japanese soldiers, entrenched in positions carved painstakingly over months, were already forced to take cover as flaming debris rained down. "We trained to endure bombardments," Toyoda said, his voice tight with tension. "We anticipated airstrikes, even naval gunfire. But nothing like this. Their artillery is not merely supporting a landing, it is reshaping the terrain itself." Ugaki's gaze lingered on the smoke rising above the hills. "We rely on caves, tunnels, and prepared positions to reduce casualties, but they target the approaches, the supply points, even the terrain. Every explosion cuts off lines of communication, kills our men before they can fight. This is not attrition, it is annihilation at the source." On shore, the defenders attempted to return fire, though their weapons were limited in both range and accuracy. Artillery crews scrambled to man the few guns that survived the initial bombardment. Mortar fire licked at the landing beaches, but the Americans were already adjusting their approach. P-38, Lightnings and F-6F Hellcats swooped over Peleliu, strafing positions, suppressing any attempt to coordinate counterattacks. For Toyoda and Ugaki, the sight was sobering. The American doctrine of combined arms was in full display. A signal arrived from Peleliu's command post, confirming the casualties and destruction. "Admiral Toyoda, Vice Admiral Ugaki. First wave of bombardment complete. Approximately 40% of artillery positions neutralized. Several bunkers destroyed. Infantry casualties moderate, but command structures disrupted." Toyoda exhaled slowly, pressing his hands against the rail. "Moderate casualties, that is generous. The men are holding, yes, but for how long? The Americans will maintain pressure continuously until the landing. Every hour, every minute, they gain advantage." Ugaki traced the flight paths of the attacking aircraft. "Notice their pattern. Fighters cover the bombardment, suppressing anti-air defenses. Bombers strike in overlapping formations. Each wave adapts to our response. This is intelligence-driven warfare at its peak. They observe, they analyze, and they strike again with greater efficiency." As the morning progressed, the American fleet demonstrated its overwhelming coordination. Battleships fired in alternating salvos, ensuring near-constant bombardment. Destroyers patrolled closer waters, preventing any attempted Japanese naval sortie. The P-38 Lightnings, recently returned from reconnaissance, strafed supply points, ammunition caches, and fortified caves, leaving smoke and fire as markers of destruction. Ugaki turned to Toyoda, a grim line of thought forming in his mind. Our doctrine relied on patience. Lure them into protracted engagements, inflict maximum casualties, survive to fight another day. But here, each day is a countdown. Each strike, each shell, brings them closer to dominating the island. Our doctrine cannot counter such a force. Toyoda nodded slowly. Attrition is futile when the enemy has infinite resources. The Americans replace men, planes, and ships faster than we can destroy them. And on Peleliu they will strike with all three, land, sea, and air, simultaneously. Our caves and bunkers may hold temporarily, but they will become tombs unless we adapt. The generals turned their attention to the horizon again. Smoke, fire, and explosions painted a hellish tableau, each plume a signal of destruction. American planes executed low-level attacks to disrupt Japanese artillery crews, strafing trenches and ridgelines. Naval shells tore through the island's limestone hills, sending fragments flying hundreds of meters. Toyoda and Ugaki could only watch, analysing patterns, calculating losses, and considering how best to marshal what little strength remained. A mid-morning report detailed the American landing craft in approach, their hulls loaded with troops and armoured vehicles. "Admiral, Vice Admiral, Wave 1 of landing force sighted. Approximately 8,000 men, supported by 20 amphibious tanks and 24 LVTS. They are protected by ongoing naval bombardment." Ugaki's lips tightened. "Even if the first wave falters, more will come." "They will sustain pressure continuously. Each landing is supported by artillery, air cover and reinforcements. We cannot counter with isolated attacks. Every defence must be coordinated, but coordination is already disrupted." Toyoda's eyes fell to the island below. The first landing waves were already engaging the surviving Japanese defenders. Small units attempted counterattacks, ambushing lightly armoured vehicles and disrupting infantry, but their impact was marginal. The Americans, experienced in amphibious operations, adjusted quickly. Where one assault faltered, another pressed forward. The smoke of burning bunkers mingled with the salt air, the cries of men and the whine of aircraft engines creating a cacophony that would be remembered in nightmares. Ugaki gestured toward the battered ridges. "They advance relentlessly, as we feared. Yet note the effectiveness of even small resistance. Each ambush, each demolition slows them, forces adjustments. We must maximize that effect, or we will be overrun entirely." Toyoda's expression was grave. "Yes. Small victories, yes. But against this scale of assault, the victories are temporary. The Americans are not seeking single engagements. They seek total domination. Peleliu is not merely an island to be captured. It is a demonstration of their capacity to project power anywhere in the Pacific." By afternoon, the full weight of American coordination became undeniable. Bombardment continued from sea and sky. The first wave of infantry struggled under the combined fire, but naval gunfire softened defences relentlessly. Japanese soldiers, entrenched in caves and ridges, fought with desperate courage, but each attempt to organise counterattacks was hampered by fractured communication lines and relentless bombardment. Toyoda and Ugaki stood side by side on the deck of the Chikuma, silent for long moments. The scope of what they faced, the overwhelming material superiority, the tactical precision, the relentless determination of the Americans, was clearer than any reconnaissance report or map could have conveyed. "Peleliu will be a crucible," Toyoda finally said. His voice, calm but heavy with the weight of inevitability, carried across the deck. "A test not just of men, but of doctrine, courage, and endurance. And yet, against such force, we will endure as long as we can. We have no choice." Ugaki nodded solemnly. "Endurance, yes. Every cave, every ridge, every man counts. But remember this. The Americans do not fight for attrition. They fight to annihilate. And unless we adapt, every position we hold may soon become their victory, and our tomb." The horizon burned with smoke and fire as Peleliu became a battleground where courage met overwhelming industrial might. The Japanese generals, witnesses to this inferno, understood with stark clarity the scale of the challenge. The Americans had arrived not merely to take an island, but to demonstrate the unyielding power of modern naval warfare. September 13th, 1944. Peleliu's limestone ridges, once quiet and seemingly impenetrable, now reverberated with the relentless roar of war. From their command ships anchored offshore, Admiral Toyoda and Vice Admiral Ugaki watched as the first major American infantry assaults collided with the island's defenders. Early reports painted a grim picture. Japanese forces, meticulously entrenched in fortified caves and ridges, inflicted significant casualties on the landing forces. Yet the Americans pressed forward with unyielding coordination. Smoke columns, twisted metal, and the cries of the wounded filled the valleys, while artillery from ships and aircraft continued to hammer Japanese positions. Toyoda adjusted his binoculars, focusing on a jagged ridge near the island's western flank. "Observe their method," he said. "They do not attack blindly. Each wave covers the other. Artillery softens the ground ahead of infantry. Tanks follow, exploiting breaches. Even isolated resistance is quickly countered with overwhelming fire." Ugaki's voice was low, tight with tension. "They fight as if Peleliu is a series of chess moves, anticipating our responses before we even make them. Every ambush, every hidden gun emplacement is countered with calculated precision. Our doctrine relies on defensive patience, but they force engagement on our terms." Below, Japanese soldiers executed what remained of their prepared defensive strategies. Groups of infantry surged from hidden caves to ambush advancing Marines, throwing grenades at landing craft and machine gunning the exposed flanks of Sherman tanks. Explosions tore through coral ridges as demolition charges and mortars sought to slow the assault. The Americans, trained for such engagements, adapted instantly. Infantry squads flanked, artillery adjusted, and armoured vehicles provided suppressive fire while engineers cleared obstacles. Ugaki's jaw tightened as he scanned the ridge. Even the terrain, which we counted as a natural ally, is no longer in our favour. They learn quickly, using elevation, lines of fire, and smoke to minimize losses. And yet, our men fight with unimaginable courage. Every inch of ground is paid for in blood. Toyoda's expression remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed the weight of the calculations running through his mind. The scale of destruction is already apparent, yet the Americans' momentum grows. Their capacity to replace men and material is staggering. Where we lose a bunker or a trench, they advance another squad, another wave, another tank. The attrition we hoped to impose is reflected back tenfold against us. From the southern beachhead, the first tank-supported infantry units advanced into the heart of the Japanese defensive line. Japanese anti-tank teams launched desperate assaults with limited success, destroying 2 LVTS before being cut down by machine gun fire. The roar of combustion and exploding shells echoed across the ridges, carrying to the ears of the generals observing from offshore. Ugaki's voice broke slightly as he spoke. "It is not merely firepower, it is coordination, communication, and relentless execution. Each assault is a test of endurance, but they adjust faster than we can respond. Every casualty inflicted is mitigated by reinforcements almost immediately." Toyoda nodded. "Yes, observe how they exploit every gap, every hesitation. Our doctrine relies on careful preservation of strength, yet the Americans force us into continuous action. They impose attrition on their terms, not ours. This is a new form of warfare." As the morning waned, the scale of the battle became unmistakable. Japanese units, isolated by relentless bombardment and advancing infantry, engaged in close-quarters combat, often within the dark confines of caves and tunnels. The screams of men and the stench of smoke and cordite filled the air. From the command ship, Toyoda and Ugaki could see faint flares of tracer fire as Marines pressed forward, illuminating the darkened ridges with lines of fiery light. Reports arrived intermittently. Western Ridge under heavy assault. Approximately 500 American infantry advancing with armoured support. Japanese defenders attempting counterattacks from northern tunnels. Casualties high on both sides. Ugaki exhaled sharply. "High casualties. For us, every loss is magnified. Every man we cannot replace is a weakening of the island's defence. Yet they replace their men effortlessly, and still they advance." Toyoda's gaze moved to the central ridge, where Marines had begun establishing a forward perimeter. Notice the speed of consolidation. Each position taken is reinforced immediately, supply lines secured under fire. Our doctrine teaches the value of a single stronghold, yet they do not require strongholds. They create momentum and sustain it continuously. Below, Japanese defenders executed desperate flanking attacks, firing from concealed positions, rolling boulders down cliffs and detonating hidden explosives. The Americans responded with supporting fire from tanks, mortars and artillery, neutralizing the immediate threats while continuing to advance. The tactical improvisation on both sides created a chaotic ballet of destruction across Peleliu's hills. Ugaki clenched his fists, his mind racing with possibilities. We have trained to absorb force, to resist until attrition favors us. But against this, we are constantly reacting, never initiating. Each move we make is anticipated, countered, or bypassed. Our doctrine cannot sustain this level of pressure indefinitely. Toyoda remained silent for a long moment, eyes scanning the battlefield. Endurance is no longer sufficient. Every action we take must serve to delay, disrupt, or channel them into kill zones. Our men must be cunning, not merely courageous. And yet, courage alone may carry them only so far. By late afternoon, the Americans had gained footholds on key ridges. Communication lines within the Japanese defences were fractured. Ammunition and supply caches had been compromised by bombardments. Individual pockets of resistance continued to inflict casualties, but the overall momentum belonged to the Americans. From offshore, Toyoda and Ugaki noted the precision and timing of artillery, armour and infantry working as a single, relentless force. Ugaki's voice was quiet, almost reflective. This is not merely a battle for Peleliu, it is a demonstration of industrial and tactical superiority. They fight as if Peleliu were a rehearsal, learning and adapting with each wave. And yet, our men endure. That is the paradox of courage against overwhelming odds. Toyoda's hand rested on the railing, knuckles white. Yes, endurance and courage, but against an enemy whose logistics, coordination and firepower are limitless. How long before every ridge, every cave, every soldier is consumed? The island's roar is deafening, and we are caught in its echo. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the smoke of Peleliu's burning ridges painted the sky in crimson and grey. The first night would bring temporary silence, but the roar of battle had begun in earnest, leaving Japanese generals to confront an unvarnished reality. The Americans had arrived not just to seize an island, but to demonstrate the overwhelming and inexorable force of modern warfare. September 14th, 1944. Peleliu's landscape, scarred by artillery and flame, concealed the deadliest secret of the island, its network of tunnels and caves, hewn painstakingly from coral rock and reinforced over months of labour. From the vantage of their offshore command ships, Admiral Toyoda and Vice Admiral Ugaki now observed a new dimension of the battle unfolding. Reports streamed in with grim urgency. Western Ridge infiltrated. Enemy casualties significant, but Japanese defenders utilizing tunnel systems remain active. Resistance ongoing. Ugaki leaned over the railing, eyes narrowed. These tunnels, they are more than shelters. They are lethal extensions of the terrain. We underestimated their capacity to sustain prolonged resistance under bombardment. Toyoda adjusted his binoculars, scanning the ridges. Yes, each tunnel serves as a node, allowing rapid movement and flanking fire. The Americans strike the surface, yet the defenders vanish, reappear and strike again. It is a nightmare for their tactics. Below, Marines cautiously advanced across shattered ridges, aware of the invisible threat beneath them. Explosions erupted as demolition charges hidden in tunnels detonated, throwing men and equipment into the air. Coral dust and smoke filled the valleys. The eerie whistle of grenades hurled from concealed apertures kept the Americans alert, forcing them into slow, methodical progress. Ugaki's voice carried a mixture of admiration and frustration. "We designed this network to maximize attrition. Each corridor, each hidden chamber, funnels the enemy into kill zones. Yet, the Americans adapt with engineering teams, flamethrowers, and explosives. Their advance is slower, yes, but relentless. Even the most cunning traps are eventually overcome." Toyoda spoke quietly, almost to himself. "It is as if they treat every explosion, every ambush, as a rehearsal for the next one. Our ingenuity is met with their methodical perseverance. The tunnels themselves were masterpieces of defensive strategy. Complex intersections allowed small groups of Japanese soldiers to appear and disappear unpredictably. Supplies and ammunition were stored in hidden caches. Ventilation shafts and secondary exits ensured that defenders could evade encirclement. The Americans, learning the terrain under fire, were forced to employ flamethrowers, demolition charges, and carefully coordinated infantry assaults to neutralize each stronghold." Ugaki frowned. "Observe how our doctrine of attrition is challenged. We inflict heavy losses, yet they replace men and material almost instantly. Our defense is brilliant in theory, but they render its brilliance incomplete through sheer persistence." Toyoda's gaze lingered on the ridge lines. "Persistence and coordination. The tunnel networks are designed to fragment the enemy, but they maintain formation, communication, and supply lines even under bombardment. Our methods cannot disrupt them entirely." From within the tunnels, Japanese soldiers fought fiercely. Machine guns were mounted at strategic angles, grenades were hurled into narrow corridors, and demolition charges exploded beneath advancing LVTs. Each engagement was brutal, often hand-to-hand, with Marines forced to clear chambers methodically. Yet, even as defenders exacted heavy costs, the Americans' systematic approach slowly eroded the network. Ugaki's voice hardened. "Every chamber destroyed is another opportunity for them to learn, to adapt. The tunnels are formidable, but their advantage is fleeting. This is not a war of static defense. It is a test of endurance against an enemy who refuses to tire." Reports indicated partial breaches of the main tunnel complexes. Marines, using flamethrowers and controlled demolitions, advanced into the darkened corridors, neutralizing defenders with terrifying efficiency. Yet, for every chamber cleared, another soldier emerged from hidden exits, continuing resistance elsewhere. The island itself seemed alive, its subterranean veins channeling defiance into every confrontation. Toyoda exhaled slowly. "We underestimated the psychological impact of tunnels on the enemy. They fear what cannot be seen, and yet our men must endure the countermeasures they bring. Courage alone may not suffice. Skill and adaptability are now paramount." Ugaki's eyes swept the island. "It is remarkable. Our preparations were meticulous, yet the Americans confront them not with hesitation, but with innovation. Flamethrowers, explosives, suppressive fire, all applied with precision. Our tunnels were meant to be sanctuaries and traps. Instead, they become arenas where courage and endurance meet overwhelming ingenuity." The sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the ridges and valleys. The roar of battle diminished temporarily as both sides regrouped. Smoke lingered, carrying the scent of cordite, salt, and fire. Toyoda and Ugaki understood that the night would bring neither rest nor clarity. From beneath the island, the tunnels remained a hidden battlefield, shaping the course of the engagement above. Ugaki finally spoke, voice low and measured. "The Americans see only the surface. Yet the island's heart fights back. Our doctrine is alive in these tunnels, yet it is no longer sufficient. Each day will test whether our ingenuity can match their inexhaustible persistence." Toyoda's gaze lingered on the island, unblinking. "Indeed. This is Peleliu in all its fury. Its roar comes not only from the hills, but from the veins beneath. The night will reveal which side endures and which side adapts or falls." As darkness approached, the island seemed to exhale. Above, the fleet remained vigilant, supporting ground operations with artillery and air cover. Below, the tunnels whispered with the footsteps, shouts, and determination of Japanese soldiers determined to make every inch of Peleliu a testament to resistance. In the minds of Toyoda and Ugaki, the magnitude of the challenge crystallized. Peleliu was no mere island. It was a living, breathing crucible of war, testing doctrine, courage, and ingenuity against an opponent whose resources and persistence appeared limitless. September 15th, 1944. Darkness fell over Peleliu like a shroud, and with it came the Japanese response, swift, fierce, and terrifyingly disciplined. From the ridge lines and hidden tunnels, small units slipped silently into the shadows, prepared to strike at the Americans under cover of night. Reports reached Admiral Toyoda and Vice Admiral Ugaki aboard their command ships. Enemy contact reported along Northern Ridge, patrols engaged, casualties on both sides. Ugaki's expression hardened. They move like shadows. This is not haphazard resistance. It is calculated, disciplined, and relentless. Each night is a separate battle. Toyoda nodded, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. We have trained for attrition to inflict maximum losses over time. Yet these night assaults demonstrate how mobility and surprise can amplify that effect. The Americans may have firepower, but darkness favors the defender who knows the terrain. Below, the Americans struggled with every step. Patrols reported ambushes along supply lines, grenades tossed from unseen positions, and sporadic machine gun fire that forced units to halt and regroup. Flamethrowers and artillery illuminated fleeting glimpses of Japanese fighters, but each countermeasure revealed how deeply the defenders had prepared. Ugaki mused aloud, almost to himself. Our soldiers exploit every advantage: shadows, tunnels, ridges. Each counterattack is small, yet it sows confusion, delays, and fear. This is the essence of Peleliu's resistance. Toyoda frowned. And yet, each attack costs them dearly. The Americans replace men, they adapt. Our doctrine prolongs the fight, but it cannot stop it entirely. The question is whether our sacrifices can slow them enough to preserve the island. Throughout the night, reports trickled in of repeated skirmishes, each more ferocious than the last. Japanese units vanished into the darkness after striking, leaving Marines cautious and exhausted. Supply lines were threatened, communications disrupted, and every ridge became a potential trap. Ugaki sighed. This is war at its rawest. Darkness transforms Peleliu into an ally and an enemy. The Americans see only the surface. They do not yet understand the labyrinth beneath their feet. Toyoda's eyes reflected the flickering searchlights from the fleet offshore. And still, they press on. Relentless. That is what makes this battle different. The night is our ally, yet it cannot halt their advance. Persistence, adaptation, and coordination. They carry the day, even when shadows hide them. By dawn, the counterattacks had slowed, exhausted by firepower and sustained resistance. The Japanese had inflicted damage, tested American resolve, and demonstrated the lethal potential of their hidden networks. Yet the fleet remained offshore, supporting ground operations, and the island's defenders faced the inexorable reality. Peleliu's fate would be determined not only by cunning, but by the overwhelming material and human tide that the Americans brought to bear. September 16th, 1944. The first light of dawn revealed the true extent of the carnage on Peleliu. The northern ridges, once dense with coral and scrub, had become a shattered landscape. Massive craters pocked the terrain where naval guns and aerial bombardments had struck. Smoke rose in jagged plumes from recently struck positions, and the air carried a metallic tang that stung the eyes of even the most hardened officers. Admiral Soemu Toyoda surveyed reports from his command post, face grave beneath the brim of his cap. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki joined him, holding a small map of the island marked with red ink to indicate bombardment zones. The Americans have made precise use of artillery and airstrikes, Ugaki said quietly. Every ridge we counted on for defensive advantage has been cratered, every bunker softened. Toyoda nodded. Their air power is immense. From the carriers off the coast, every strike is coordinated, every sortie calculated. Even our counterattacks under darkness cannot overcome this constant pressure. Reports filtered in from the northern and central ridges. Platoons pinned down by combined naval and aerial fire, supply lines disrupted, communications fragmented. Japanese soldiers fought from caves and tunnels, yet even these prepared positions were beginning to show signs of strain. Many bunkers collapsed under direct hits, cave entrances were blocked with debris, and supply shortages intensified. Ugaki ran a finger along the map. Look here, the high ridges. Koror, Palau and Ngesebus positions. Once our strongest defensive points, now. Craters, rubble and fire. The Americans move with terrifying precision. Toyoda's gaze hardened. They do not hesitate. Every sortie, every shell is measured to break us. But we expected attrition, yes? To wear them down to exact cost. And yet... He paused, his voice low, almost unspoken. Their material superiority is a force beyond what our doctrine can fully counter. From forward positions, Japanese field reports described the night after the bombardments. Small squads, determined to maintain their lines, emerged from the shadows to find terrain unrecognizable. Trails they had memorized were obliterated. Coral ridges that had served as cover were reduced to jagged edges. Men stumbled, fell into hidden craters, and fought through smoke and dust that choked their lungs. Ugaki reviewed a series of captured American photographs from earlier aerial reconnaissance. They study every ridge, every cave, every approach. They know where to hit, and they hit with enough force to alter the terrain itself. Even when our men survive, they must adjust constantly. Exhaustion is now a weapon of theirs. Toyoda reflected on the doctrine of the Japanese army: defense in depth, utilization of natural terrain, ambushes and attrition. Yet as the reports continued, it became painfully clear that Peleliu would test the limits of these strategies. "We must hold as long as possible," Toyoda said. "Delay their advance. Every ridge we maintain, every crater we use to slow them, is another hour we preserve our strategic position. But..." He gestured toward the map, eyes shadowed with concern. "Even our best defences are breaking under unrelenting pressure." Ugaki's mind travelled back to the initial sightings of the American fleet days prior. The overwhelming array of ships, carriers and transports had seemed almost unreal. Now the destruction on the ridges mirrored that first impression. The scale. We underestimated it. We trained for battles of attrition, yes, but nothing on this scale. Nothing that could sustain such coordinated firepower for days. In the central sector, Japanese soldiers employed a combination of small arms fire, machine guns and sniper tactics to hold back American patrols. Every ridge, every bunker, every cave became a theatre of desperate resistance. Marines reported heavy casualties in repeated assaults, yet the Americans adapted, advancing methodically with combined arms: infantry, flamethrowers, artillery, and armoured support. Back aboard the command ships, Toyoda and Ugaki convened with their senior officers. Maps were spread across tables, reports shuffled, and radios crackled with fragmented transmissions. The generals debated strategies, weighing which positions could be reinforced, which could only be held symbolically, and where to withdraw strategically. Ugaki shook his head. "We cannot hope to destroy their force outright. Every ridge we hold comes at an enormous cost, yet retreat is equally costly, psychologically and strategically. Our soldiers are resolved, but—" He trailed off, the unspoken acknowledgement of the futility lingering in the air. Toyoda's hand hovered over a map of Peleliu, pausing at each cratered ridge. "We must adapt." Use the tunnels, the caves, the natural concealments. Convert terrain into traps where possible. Force them into kill zones. We cannot stop their advance, but we can exact a toll that they will remember. The day passed with intermittent bombardments, reconnaissance flights, and small American patrols probing Japanese lines. Smoke and dust filled the valleys, the screams of men and the thunder of naval guns echoed across the shattered ridges. For the defenders, it was a day of small victories, survival, and grim determination. By nightfall, the island bore the marks of relentless conflict. Ridges were reduced to twisted coral, trenches partially collapsed, and fires burned where supply dumps had been struck. Yet Japanese soldiers remained in position, holding what ground they could, hiding in caves and tunnels, and preparing for the inevitable night counterattacks. Ugaki observed the horizon, a faint orange glow from burning supply points reflecting in his eyes. We fight for every ridge, for every metre of Peleliu. But the Americans are relentless. Their material, their coordination, their determination. It is unlike anything we have faced. Every day they reshape the battlefield itself. Toyoda turned toward the sea, the outlines of the fleet glinting under the setting sun. And still, they will come tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. We hold, we fight, we endure. But we must remember, Peleliu is a test not just of strategy, but of spirit. Every ridge we hold is a statement, every crater a testament to resistance, even as the tide of fire and steel crashes over us. September 17th, 1944. The first reports from the night's skirmishes reached the Japanese command headquarters on Peleliu. Through flickering lamplight and the constant crackle of field radios, Admiral Soemu Toyoda and Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki absorbed a mixture of facts, speculation, and fear. Each message painted a picture more vivid and unsettling than the last. Toyoda's fingers traced the worn edges of the map of Peleliu. Cratered ridges, smoke-darkened valleys, and disrupted supply lines were marked in red and black ink. He studied them with an intensity born of both military discipline and personal dread. "Ugaki," he said, voice low. "Even our best positions, those we considered impregnable, are under constant assault. The Americans are relentless, and yet they do not rush. Every movement is calculated, deliberate." Ugaki nodded, adjusting his cap. "It is what we feared. Not just their firepower, but their operational patience. They strike where we are weakest, exploit every flaw, yet never overextend. They understand terrain as we do, perhaps better. Their reconnaissance is exhaustive, their coordination precise. We see it in every crater, every destroyed bunker, every supply point reduced to ash. Reports from the northern ridges detailed repeated American patrols probing Japanese defences. Each incursion met stiff resistance. Japanese snipers, machine gun nests, and pre-positioned ambushes inflicted casualties. But the Americans adapted quickly, learning from every encounter. Communication logs suggested that small units adjusted tactics on the fly, combining infantry with artillery and armour to reduce Japanese positions methodically. In one corner of the command room, a radio officer relayed news from the southern sector. "Sir, reports indicate another supply cache destroyed. Casualties are high among our forward squads. The Marines are advancing cautiously but steadily." Toyoda exhaled slowly. "Every ridge we hold costs men and material we cannot replace. Yet retreat is not an option. Morale, discipline, and doctrine demand that we stand, and still—" His eyes scanned the horizon beyond the silhouetted ridges. The Americans advance with overwhelming control, reshaping the battlefield itself. How can we hope to attrit such a force? Ugaki, seated at the map table, leaned forward, his expression grim. "We have faced attrition before, yes. At Guadalcanal, at the Solomons, even at the Marianas. But never with such material dominance, never with such calculated coordination. They are not merely a fleet of ships or battalions of marines. They are an industrial tide, each move amplified by logistics, air cover, and armoured support. It is unlike anything we have prepared for. Toyoda's voice took on a reflective edge, tinged with frustration. Our doctrine teaches defence in depth, utilisation of terrain, ambushes and attrition. Yet they do not falter, do not yield, and adapt faster than we can counter. Every bunker we fortify, every cave we defend, is eventually neutralized. They destroy with precision, not haste. It is demoralizing, Ugaki. Ugaki shuffled through reports from forward commanders. The recurring theme was clear. Japanese soldiers were fighting valiantly, but exhaustion and isolation were taking their toll. Many units were cut off from reinforcements, relying solely on pre-positioned supplies, which were rapidly depleted. Our men show courage beyond measure, Ugaki said quietly, almost to himself. But courage alone will not overcome this tidal wave of coordinated might. At dawn, a courier arrived with intelligence gathered from captured American pilots and reconnaissance photos. Toyoda studied the documents, brow furrowed. Their planning is meticulous. Look here, the placement of artillery to support advancing infantry, the coordination between air sorties and naval bombardments. They anticipate our counters before we execute them. It is almost as if they have predicted our moves in advance. Ugaki's lips pressed into a thin line. And yet they continue to respect certain constraints. We can observe patterns, weaknesses, and timing. There is opportunity if we are daring enough. Small-scale counterattacks, ambushes, or even feints could slow them, perhaps even inflict meaningful losses. But such measures are risky, and the cost in lives is extreme. The two admirals fell silent for a moment, listening to the distant thunder of artillery and the intermittent staccato of small arms fire. Smoke curled over the northern ridges, drifting like a dark omen. For a moment, the scale of the battle, the relentless pounding of firepower, the methodical advance of American forces, seemed almost surreal. Ugaki broke the silence. Toyoda-san, we knew Peleliu would be difficult. We expected to fight for every ridge, every tunnel, every metre of coastline. But we underestimated not just their force, but their patience, their adaptability. This is no longer a battle merely of strength. It is a battle of endurance and cunning. Their industrial and logistical supremacy makes every day a trial for us. Toyoda's gaze remained fixed on the map. Yes, and yet we must hold, not merely for territory, but for morale, for the doctrine that defines our army. Every crater, every destroyed bunker, every delay imposed on them is a testament to Japanese resolve. Even if the cost is high, even if Peleliu cannot be held forever, we must fight as if it can. Ugaki sighed, the weight of command pressing heavily upon him. The men in the field, they must sense what we feel. That this is not simply a battle for an island, but a confrontation with the overwhelming might of an enemy who reshapes the battlefield at will. And still they fight, still they endure. It is remarkable, and yet tragic. Toyoda finally looked up, meeting Ugaki's eyes. We have always known that defeat is possible, that the Americans possess superior resources and can project power across the Pacific. But seeing it here in the craters of Peleliu, the fires on the ridges, it is humbling. We adapt, we fight, we endure. But the reality is undeniable. This is a war of material supremacy as much as strategy. The room fell silent again, save for the muted crackle of the radios. Orders were drafted, maps updated, and plans adjusted to reflect the night's losses. Despite the overwhelming odds, Toyoda and Ugaki continued to analyze, to strategize, to search for every possible advantage, however small, that might allow their forces to slow the American advance and preserve what they could of the island's defences. As night fell, the glow from burning supply points and shattered ridges painted a grim tableau of the battlefield. High above, American aircraft continued their surveillance, carriers launched new strikes, and Marines pressed forward methodically. Japanese commanders, reflecting on the day's reports, faced the stark truth. Peleliu was not merely contested. It was being reshaped by an enemy whose mastery of combined arms, logistics, and industrial might challenged every assumption of Japanese military doctrine. Toyoda turned to Ugaki once more. "Tomorrow, the ridges will still be ours, at least in part. But we must prepare for every eventuality. Every American advance will be met with precision, every bunker, cave, and tunnel utilized to the utmost. And yet—" His voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "We must also acknowledge the reality. Peleliu is no longer just a battle. It is a testament to the enemy's power and a test of our endurance." Ugaki nodded. "And in that test we will hold, even if the cost is everything." The generals fell silent once more, listening to the distant echoes of the ongoing battle. The night was long, and Peleliu, shattered and smouldering, bore witness to the confrontation between two forces defined not only by skill, but by the stark realities of industrial power, tactical innovation, and the indomitable will of soldiers on both sides. September 20th, 1944. The sun rose over Peleliu, casting an orange haze over the shattered landscape. Smoke from burned-out bunkers mingled with the salty sea air, carrying the acrid scent of explosives and scorched earth. For the Japanese defenders, the day began with the same grim routine, counting the cost of the previous night, reinforcing positions where possible, and preparing for another relentless wave of American assault. Admiral Soemu Toyoda and Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki convened in a temporary command post carved into the hillside. The map before them, once neatly marked with defensive lines, was now a patchwork of red ink, blacked-out sectors, and chaotic symbols, evidence of the battlefield's relentless evolution. Toyoda's eyes lingered on the final ridge, the last significant defensive position on the island. "This ridge," he said quietly, tracing its contour with a trembling finger, "is all that remains of our structured defense. Once it falls, the island will be open. The Americans will dictate the battlefield entirely." Ugaki nodded solemnly. "We have held as long as possible, Toyoda-san. The men are exhausted, supplies nearly gone, yet they continue to fight. The Americans advance deliberately, maintaining pressure while minimizing their own losses. It is a display of precision and patience, and it tests us beyond anything we have endured." Reports filtered in from the front lines. Forward squads had repelled several small incursions, but at a heavy cost. Ammunition was low, communications were fragmented, and reinforcements were non-existent. Every bunker and cave had been utilized to its fullest, yet even the most ingeniously prepared positions were compromised by concentrated artillery, flamethrowers, and coordinated infantry assaults. On the ridge itself, Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa oversaw the remaining defenders. The men were grim, faces streaked with dirt and soot, uniforms tattered and blood-stained. Nakagawa walked among them, offering quiet words of encouragement. "Hold fast," he said. "Every meter of this ridge is Japanese soil. Every step we delay them is a testament to our courage. Remember your families, your honor. Fight as if Peleliu itself depends on your actions, because it does." From the southern approaches, the unmistakable rumble of artillery heralded another American advance. Marines moved methodically, using covering fire to suppress Japanese positions before sending squads forward. Nakagawa's men opened fire from concealed positions, snipers taking careful aim while machine gunners raked advancing troops. Despite the fierce defense, the Americans adjusted quickly, exploiting minor gaps and pushing forward with relentless momentum. Ugaki received a report detailing the situation on the ridge. "Casualties are mounting," the officer said. Some units are nearly at half strength. Ammunition is critically low. Resistance is heroic, but the Americans are adapting to every tactic. Forward positions may not hold beyond this day. Toyoda listened in silence, absorbing the grim reality. He had witnessed countless battles over the course of the Pacific War, yet the scale, coordination and methodical approach of the Americans at Peleliu was unlike anything he had faced. "Even in retreat they press forward with minimal loss," he muttered. "Our doctrine of attrition falters against their industrial and logistical might. Every day we hold, we delay, yet the inevitability of their advance is undeniable." On the ridge, Japanese defenders continued their desperate stand. Flame and smoke twisted around the craters, punctuated by the sharp cracks of rifles and machine guns. Engineers detonated preset charges to collapse tunnels and caves, slowing the Americans' progress. Every bunker destroyed, every ambush executed was a small victory, yet each came at a horrific cost. Men fell silently, dragged into shadowed craters, leaving only the sound of gunfire and the distant rumble of naval artillery. Nakagawa paused at a collapsed bunker, surveying the scene. "We cannot hold forever," he admitted quietly to his adjutant. "But every second we delay them, every life we sacrifice, is a testament to the spirit of Peleliu. They may take the island, but they will never erase the courage with which it was defended." Back in the command post, Toyoda and Ugaki reflected on the day's reports. "The ridge will fall eventually," Ugaki said, voice low. "Our men fight with honor, but this is a war they cannot win by force alone. Their endurance, ingenuity and patience outweigh our attritional methods. Even if we hold sections of the ridge temporarily, the Americans' methodical approach will consume it piece by piece." Toyoda nodded slowly. "And yet, this defense is not without value. Each delay, each calculated sacrifice, imposes costs on them, tests their resolve, and demonstrates the limitations of their operational model. In that, there is honor. In that, there is purpose." Night fell once again over Peleliu, the glow from distant fires casting long shadows across the ridge. The Americans prepared for another day of advance, while Japanese soldiers dug in, fortified their last positions, and steeled themselves for the inevitable. Each man understood the stakes, each recognized the imbalance of power, yet every soldier chose to fight regardless. Ugaki's voice broke the silence. "Toyoda-san, history will remember this, not for the conquest nor for the fall of an island, but for the courage displayed here in the face of overwhelming force by those who had nothing but their resolve and each other. Peleliu is a crucible, and our men endure it with unmatched bravery." Toyoda placed a hand on the map covering the final ridge. "And so we endure as well," he said. "Command is not merely about victory, but about stewardship, guiding those under our care, making every action count, even when the outcome seems inevitable. Peleliu will test our doctrine, our patience, and our spirit. And though the Americans advance, we will ensure they pay dearly for every step.